Welcome to the Sober Nation FM podcast, where we're putting recovery on the map. I'm your host, Jonathan Sylvester. This show is brought to you by Sobriety Engine. Do you want to take your recovery to the next level? Do you want more support, community, and fellowship? Sobriety Engine is an incredible community of men and women supporting each other in their recovery. You can get a ton of great tips, resources, and guidance to help you succeed in recovery and in life. Visit sobrietyengine.com to join today. Sober Nation FM is also brought to you by Recover Health. If you're ready to get fit and start living a healthier lifestyle, all while supporting your sobriety, then you can learn more about having me as your own personal fitness and nutrition coach at rcvrhealth.com. And whether you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or watching on YouTube, please share this with your friends. Follow, subscribe, and leave a review. Nation, let's hop right into today's episode. Today, I'll be speaking with sober yogi Cole Chance. Thanks for coming on the show, Cole.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So glad to have you. So before we hop in and we talk about yoga and your traveling and your retreats and everything you've been up to these days, I'd really like for you to just share a little bit about what things were like before you got sober and how you actually found recovery.
Oh boy. Things were not good. Things were quite challenging. I had a long road. I started using and drinking really young, about 13. So I had a pretty solid, from then until 29, quite solid addiction going on.
Okay.
I traveled a lot in the States in the last several years. I was definitely like a moving away from the situation, getting away. So I was always moving around, trying to, because it was this place, it was this person, it was this job, it was, whatever it was.
Not you.
That I was trying to get away from. So really running towards or away from lots of things under the guise of that I was seeking freedom. So I say often that, I feel like I came out of my mother looking for freedom, and I looked for it in so many different ways. And during that point of my life, I was looking for it, through drugs and alcohol, which I feel like I found in the beginning. And that's what made me keep coming back. And then in the end, that medicine, that it felt like it provided me this medicinal freedom and connection that I felt like it provided me in the beginning, just turned into a poison.
Yeah. Well, I get that. And yeah, so, and I do want to dive in a little more. I always like to concentrate on the solution, so to speak, more so than, what things used to be like. But I do want to know more about your story, and I'm sure our listeners and watchers do too. So I am curious, you said that it was a pretty solid stretch of addiction. I was definitely one of those people. Like, there were maybe a few days where like I had to stay sober for a certain period of time, and that was about it. Like, I hear about people having, a month or weeks or something, and that never happened with me. Is that kind of where you were at with all of it?
Yeah, no, I wasn't, I didn't have days off unless I was in treatment, which I went to about 6 treatments, and I went to many detoxes and many hospitals. So unless it was like an induced detox or induced not using,
Yeah,
I was never sober. And it's really interesting to think about now. Like, I never was sober from morning till night. I mean, when I woke up, I would start drinking.
Yeah.
So I always had something in my system. And that was my normal. And it's so interesting how adaptive that we are as humans, that was my normal, and reality was terrifying. And so, yeah, it's just really fascinating.
Yeah, I get that. Well, so, and I do want to ask, like, what was your, people phrase it differently, but what was your turning point, or like your rock bottom? Like, where did things have to go, or how far did you have to get into all of this for you to say, like, okay, enough is enough? Or maybe you were forced into sobriety to a degree. What actually happened?
Well, in the end, people ask the question, like, what was your rock bottom? And I'm like, oh man, I had many. Like, there were so many points that it should have been like, this is it. And I don't even know if the last one was really the worst. It was just that it was the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in the end, though, I was primarily an alcoholic, the morning till night alcoholic, but then anything that was around, I completely abused. But in the end, I started injecting heroin, and I wound up overdosing on a mix of like heroin and cocaine. And that did it. Like that, coming out of that and realizing it's like I had like a bird's eye view of the scene of me and like a flashback of like all of the prior years. And it's like I realized I'm not doing this to suffer. Like I didn't start this to suffer.
Mm.
I started this because it made me feel big. It made me feel more like me. It made me feel connected. I felt freedom in it. And it's like I had this tiny little snapshot of like, this is never going to work. Like this is never gonna work. And actually, I had been told years before in a treatment center, in a really casual conversation with this woman, that I had asked her, "How do you do it?" Like I couldn't for the life of me figure out why or how someone would go about getting sober.
Right.
And that came into me. I never wanted to get sober. I wanted to do it right. So that's the mentality I was
Mm.
working with. But something that she told me came into my head that day whenever I was coming out, whenever I was awakening from that overdose. And what she had said is that you could be high or you could be happy. And one day you'll realize that they're not ever going to go together.
Wow.
And it's like that resonated. I was like, I'm trying to make this go together like it used to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna die doing it. And that is not what I signed up for. Like the dying part, I was wanting to have fun. I was wanting to find freedom, and didn't sign up to die. And that in the end was what shifted.
Wow. That's pretty awesome that, we talk about like a seed being planted and that conversation from so long before, just a casual conversation is what popped into your head. That's pretty awesome. I think that says a lot about, people carrying the message of recovery, because it was like just that one conversation is really what resonated with you.
Yeah, and it wasn't the treatment centers. It wasn't. I think she was maybe some tech. I don't know. It was a casual conversation underneath a tree
Hmm.
of someone that I can't even picture her face. Like
Wow.
it was just something that stuck. I hadn't thought about it since, and I thought about it that day. And so it is so important that we're able to share. And I think that in society we have such a thing as like we want to fix something, we want to do it right, we want to do something, and we want to see a solution. Like
Right.
we want to turn A into B.
Yeah.
And in terms of recovery and sharing the message, it's like you just share, and you don't need to expect anything back. You just share your experience, you share your hope, you share what you can, and it ripples out. And it doesn't necessarily going to give you back a return, but you don't know what that looks like in the future to other people. I wish I could find that woman. She probably has no idea that she had such a big part in shifting my trajectory.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome. Well, so now you overdosed. Did you go back to treatment? How did you actually get, like, what did starting the recovery process look like?
I didn't go back to treatment. One of the things that had happened is that I had kind of been trying to get back into a treatment, and I actually couldn't get anyone to take me. I was in Austin, and even the state funded places, they were like, essentially like, we're not going to keep bringing you back into rehab.
Hmm.
My family wouldn't give me any more money. They'd been sending me to treatment centers all over. Um, it's like everyone, I had just checked myself twice out of the local detox center. Like no one would take me back
Okay. Yeah.
except a sober living place that I lived in, that I had been kicked out of like a month prior. I called them back. I didn't have any money. And it was the first time that I really reached out for help, like legitimately, by myself. Like I
Okay.
wasn't pushed into it. And I called
Right.
this place back and I said, "Do you have a bed? I'm done." And I left in quite colorful flames prior. And for no reason that they needed to, they let me back in, at the risk of everyone else that was staying there and everything. They let me back in. They reserved one bed. There's one sober living place in all of Austin, Texas that is high risk, meaning that you don't have to come from treatment. Like they'll
Okay.
take you off the street with only
Yeah.
like 24 hours. There was one place that would do that, and one bed is scholarshiped. and they gave it back to me, and they really shouldn't have,
Yeah.
like in terms of looking at things, and they did.
Mm.
And they told me to like come in on a Wednesday, and it was like Sunday night. And I was like, oh
That's rough.
man. And I showed up on Tuesday night with my bag, and I said, I'll sleep on your couch. And they were like, come in.
Wow.
It's like the weight of the world fell off of me
Mm.
when I was able to walk in there, and the safety that felt. Because like just being outside of that, like just like walking down the street, it's like, oh my gosh, this is terrifying.
Yeah.
And then to be able to walk into a space where you know that people understand. So from there, I was doing meetings. I was really reliant on therapy, um, and my yoga practice, which is
Yeah.
something that I had tasted bits of prior,
Okay.
but that I knew was going to be a piece whenever I could like sober up enough to do it. Like I knew there was something there for me, but I wasn't really able to go full on. And then once I was in the sober living place, I went full on, and I just came back to my mat every day as
Awesome.
well.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely want to get into the yoga here in a second, but I do want to ask, and I like asking our guests this, especially for the new people that might be listening. And I always find it interesting as well. What would you say was the biggest thing that you struggled with early on in sobriety?
Hmm. The biggest thing that I struggled with, there's a couple things. A big thing for me was like the owning of it.
Okay. Yeah.
I was really shameful. I didn't want to tell anybody. So often I would relapse. Like, I mean, I never really had very much sobriety at all. Like,
Yeah.
but like I would say, I'm not going to drink tonight. And then someone would say, do you want to drink? And I'd be like, okay. Like, cause I didn't want to say, I don't drink. Like for me,
Mm.
those words, like they couldn't formulate in my mouth and exit. So there was something, I had this really big shame against that. So like learning how to own it, learning how to be like, I can do anything. I just can't do this one thing. Like
Yeah.
there's just one thing that I'm not going to do, and I'm completely free to do everything. Some reason it was such a stain. So learning to be able to speak about it and own it in terms of like casually of like, this is me, this is this thing that I have, and this thing that I don't do anymore
Mm.
because it allows me to do all the other things, rather than being in shame around it, I think was a big one.
Okay. Okay. So I think you said there were a couple things. So anything else that you feel like you kind of had a tough time with early on in your journey into this deal or as you got rolling?
I feel very lucky in terms of the craving. I I don't know how, because this is the first time that I didn't medically detox. Normally, I always had to medically detox because I would have
Okay.
seizures, and I was very, very far in it. And after I got myself detox, which was really, really challenging in the
Mhm.
sober house, but it's almost like I kind of blacked it out or something. I know it was hard, but it's like hard to remember as well. But I remember not thinking that I was going to have, it's like the thickness of the craving seemed to dissolve way more than I'd ever had prior.
Yeah.
And I
I
really don't know what that was about. I really don't know what
okay.
that was about.
Yeah, no, I get that 100%. I think, I was just thinking that when you said, when you walked in the door of this sober living place, like it just felt like you felt safe. You felt like you were in the right place. Like this weight came off of your shoulders. That's how I felt when I walked into treatment. And
Mm,
I don't even think I knew that, like, it was like, okay, I don't know if this is the right place, but it feels like the right place right now, at least. And
mhm,
and I think that, yeah, I can't really explain the craving not being there either. I do know that in large part, I think it was because to some degree I made a decision like, okay, I'm gonna give this a real effort. And
mhm.
before it was just like I'm in pain, like I just need a break, basically. You know?
Same, exactly the same.
Yeah.
I
So,
just wanted to feel better for a little bit, and then I was going to try it again.
right. Yeah, exactly. We're going to figure out the perfect formula. of heroin and drinking, or whatever our drug of choice was, and it'll all balance out. But yeah, it doesn't work like that in the end. And I like how you said, and how that lady was sharing, that is stuck in your mind, that you can either be happy or you can get high. Like the two just don't mix. It's not going to end up that way. Like that's just the bottom line. I think that's very true. So I want to come back around to the yoga. So you had been introduced to yoga before, and I can understand that. And I've talked to people about this actually, that, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more, and I'll learn some more about yoga here, because I'm not an expert by any means, but that like the real yoga practice, and like the spiritual aspect, and everything that goes into it, not just like, uh, don't hate me for this, the stretching that we do,
Yeah.
and the different poses and stuff like that, that there's a lot more to it than that. And I can see how it would be a struggle to get really involved in it, especially when we're like deep in addiction. So how did you kind of circle back around to this? Like what happened?
Well, I took my first yoga class at a treatment center.
Okay,
So
same.
yes, yay for treatment centers,
Yeah,
introducing us.
yeah.
And I clearly remember being like, if I ever get sober, which I'm
Mhm.
not going to, like I had both of those thoughts, like my devil, my
Right.
angel. If I ever do, but I'm not,
Yeah.
then I'm going to check this yoga thing out.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it was kind of in the back of my mind. Um, there's something about something that really resonated with me is like especially whenever I first took the yoga class, whenever I was first in this treatment center with yoga, is
Mhm.
I was just a hot mess, as you are when you go into treatment. But like even being like, touch your right hand to your left foot, I was like, whoa. Like there was this like connection that had been gone. So there was
Right.
something about the physicality of it, the
Okay.
breath, which is something that I had never really thought about. I never really thought about thinking about my breath
Mm.
and about how that can, affect the body. We're sensation addicts, among other things. So starting to feel some sensations going on was really like, oh, like there's things happening inside my body without me putting things in my body, was interesting. And then also for me, I spoke the language of physical. As I was younger, I always played sports. I was very, very athletic. So there's something about my body remembering the endorphins that it got, those feel good things. So that kind of came back up as well. But a big part of it, so that's just the physical component, but such a
Yeah.
big part of it was the self-inquiry.
Hmm.
So whenever like she would talk about different yoga concepts, and like everything was like zhoo, 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 like the questions she would ask, the self-inquiry, bringing up, the way that we are with ourselves, the way that we are with the world. and
So can you
and
share an example of what you're talking about? Like one of the questions that might have been asked or might be asked now, or that you might ask one of your classes?
well, maybe it would be like how are you with yourself? Like how do you talk to yourself on a day to
Yeah.
day? Like what's the relationship that you have with the stuff? What are the quality of the tone of voice that
Man, that's a good
you
question.
use? Or how do you what does freedom mean to you? Like what does that what does how do you value, there's just so much. If you're looking more like at yoga like concepts, um the yamas and the niyamas are kind of like observances. Probably this is probably bastardizing it, but there's 10 of them. So they're kind of like the yoga 10 commandments, I say,
Okay.
the yoga invitations. And it's like talking about compassion,
Hmm.
and then truthfulness. Like, are you telling the truth? Are you honest to yourself? Like, how honest are you? Like, what are you hiding from? Emotion are you not willing to feel? What are you, there's just so much. And so all of these, they go on and on,
Okay.
and they deal with how you are with yourself and how you are in the world. And
Hmm.
that's just a small little component,
Wow.
something that would be more kind of that I probably would have been asked during the beginning days. That was
Okay.
like, whoa. So it's a
Yeah.
big self inquiry, and it has a lot of similarities to like the 12 steps. And one thing is that I was always really resistant to the 12 steps,
Mm.
really resistant to the 12 steps. And this is just an innate rebel in me. I just wasn't going to listen
Yeah, I
to
get that.
authority.
Yeah, I get
But
it.
it's the same thing. It's really interesting. Like the yoga component like almost mirrors the 12 steps in so many ways, as lots of different philosophies and theories kind of mirror each other. So eventually I was able to digest the 12 steps more using like a yoga language. So it's
Okay,
like that language let me in
that's cool.
when the 12 step language I couldn't, like butting my head against the door.
Right.
Even though it was really the same thing, I was able to like come in that way.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like a lot of the, when we're talking about, the principles of a 12-step program or just some of the things that we talk about, in terms of just doing what we need to do in recovery, even if it's just doing the next right thing, so to
Yeah.
speak. Sounds like there's a lot that's aligned there between the two, like in regards to those principles. So I want to ask, um, because I think I had some misconceptions about yoga, and maybe I still do. Like I said, I'm no expert by any means. That's why you're here to answer all the questions. So
Bring
so
it.
what do you think some of the biggest misconceptions about yoga are, and like maybe some of the biggest barriers between people and trying yoga or like getting involved in yoga? Like what have you seen?
Lots of things, and a lot of it is due to the marketing of yoga. So I get that. A lot of it is that it's for females, that it's
Yeah.
for especially white in shape females in bikinis somehow.
Right, right,
And
right.
so it's really there's been a bubble created due to the marketing of it, due to the fact that it's a product. It makes a lot of money over here.
Mhm.
So I teach online and I've taught online for like 5 years. So
Okay.
I get people message from all over the world. It's been really it's really amazing. I never planned on doing it this way, but I've really created this kind of on this global community. And one of the biggest things that I get from people whenever they just are reaching out to share is that they say that they don't feel comfortable at a yoga class because they don't feel like they fit in,
Mm.
which is really a human issue, is like the feeling of not feeling like we fit, the
Yeah.
feeling of not being accepted, and all of us can relate to that in some aspect, some place that we don't fit. So it's really sad to hear that happens so much in the yoga community,
Yeah.
um, which should be a place of acceptance. And it happens in 12 step rooms too, people
Sure.
thinking that they're not alcoholic enough, or that they're not whatever enough, that they don't fit. So it's the visage that we put up that makes people nervous. So that misconception. And of course there are studios that you're going to go in and everyone's going to be wearing $100 yoga pants, and
Right. Rocking the
that
Lululemon.
sweaty and
Yeah.
beautiful, and all of that. And then there's just so many different styles of yoga, and it's just about finding the right one, just like it's like finding the right meeting, or it's finding the right fit.
Okay.
A couple other misconceptions are that one, there is like the male thing. Will never get my father to do yoga. Oh my gosh, if I could ever get him to do yoga,
Yeah.
or just stretch,
Right,
dad.
right. Yeah.
um or that you have to be flexible. There's this meme that I saw the other day that says like you it's like saying you're too dirty to take a bath, like if you're saying
Mhm.
you're not flexible enough to do yoga,
Right,
because that's
right.
just one component. The physical aspect is just one component. It's just another way to get into creating a relationship with yourself. Like,
Mhm.
how do I talk to myself whenever my body is learning new things? Like, whenever I'm challenged and I'm doing something that's hard, how do I talk to myself? Like,
Yeah.
how am I speaking to myself? Or what happens when my body moves quickly? Where does my mind go? What happens when my body moves really slow? Where does my mind go? It's kind of, the mat is a metaphor for lots of things, on the mat, off the mat. Some of the other things, a lot of people in certain parts of the world, there were certain mindsets or certain like cultural mindsets, think that it's tied to religion, which I guess that it could be in certain ways, but definitely, yeah, definitely not the way that we practice it here.
Sure.
Those are some of the biggest, those are some of the biggest ones that I think.
Okay. Yeah, those are some of the ones I really I think it's funny that you said, it's not for guys right off the bat because I think that's even though again, like when I went into treatment, like at this point I was like, okay, I'm just going to be just tell me what to do. Like I'm going to stop acting like I know everything. Like I don't know anything at this point. Like my life has
Mhm.
been I've run my life into the ground, but yeah, I mean, I think I kind of went into it thinking like, okay, like, this is for chicks basically.
Mhm.
And I didn't go the yoga route, but like I'm a fitness and nutrition coach. So I get a lot of what you're saying. Especially about like the I need to be flexible to try it because it's almost like when someone says, "Well, I need to get in shape first before I go to the gym." Right?
Yeah.
I need to work my way up. I need to, be able to do XYZ before I get in the gym. I really, and I don't do it enough. I really love yoga. I think for guys, like one of the things that, because like the warm up that I had people do, for instance, like, there's definitely some yoga slash kind of mobility poses, like a cat cow
Mhm.
and different things like that, like things I do every day. And, some guys will be a little like adverse to this. I'm like, dude, power lifters that literally lift hundreds and sometimes thousands of pounds are doing these same movements like on a daily basis, so definitely not just for women. And I get what you're saying about like you do see a lot of studios that are in really upscale areas. And but I think it is one of those things. It really is an open thing, just like recovery. Like everyone is, from what I see, everyone's welcome, and there are a lot of different types of yoga and so many different types of people involved in it. So let's assume that there's someone listening right now, and maybe that they're thinking some of these same things that you kind of shared about the misconceptions, and maybe they've thought about giving yoga a try, or we're kind of talking them into it a little bit right now. And they haven't tried it out yet. Like, what would you say to them?
Well, this is going to sound like a plug, but
Plug it. Come on.
I do have, I've been teaching online for, yeah, about 5 years. I actually have hundreds of videos online.
I've
So it's a
seen I've
really
seen a bunch on
easy,
YouTube.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
a really easy to begin to just to kind of decipher it if you're too nervous to go to a class.
Okay.
Like if you're just wanting to check it out a little bit, I
Hmm.
would look up just beginners yoga, gentle yoga, just some of and just explore. And there's lots of it online. It doesn't have to be mine, but finding someone that you resonate with is really important. Finding the teacher that you resonate with. But then finding a local studio is so important. Like I think that at home yoga, it's great. You can do it on your own time, but it's about finding the community. There's so much juice there, and there's so much that you can get from being in community spaces that I think is really beautiful. But it is really is finding someone that you resonate with and trying to be cautious of generalizing. Um, like if you take one class with somebody, to not generalize the whole of yoga, because we're all just interpreting it out of our own filters. So the way that I teach will be completely different from the way that somebody else teaches. So you can find some that's more spiritual based, or you can
Okay.
find some that's um, more physical based, or more softer, or more strengthening, or there's so much. And it's a beautiful tool to weave into your recovery practice. And yeah, I mean, it's really shaped and molded, and had a big part in saving my life. I really really believe.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I love how you talked about. I think the biggest thing I connected with, it was the moving around, it was the endorphins, but the breathing. Like I realized for the first time, I was such a shallow breather, and like
Mm,
I had never become aware of my breathing. Like it was just like these short little breaths. And when I actually took the time, like when I was aware of it, and I guess, uh, I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I guess a lot of yoga is about like being present, right?
mhm.
And I think that really helped kind of like ground me, and I wasn't thinking about a lot of the other stuff going on in the world, and I was really just focused on my breathing. I was like, wow, this feels really different and good
Mhm.
and relaxing. And I think one of the realizations I had about yoga is I think most of the time, like I'm someone that likes more like restorative yoga, like more like relaxing yoga and like holding the stretches a little longer. And then one time my wife and I went to, and you'll probably be familiar with them since you're from Austin, but went to here in Houston, Black Swan Yoga opened up a studio here. And so they did this big free outdoor thing. And man, it kicked my ass. It kicked
Yeah.
my, I was like, and I was looking around, I was like, I don't know any of these poses, but I was like, man, this is like, it's tough. It was a workout, and it was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
That's
So,
another misconception is that yoga can't be hard. Some people, especially like, they're like,
yeah,
oh, yoga's for sissies. I'm like, I can put you through a yoga class that I promise that
yeah.
you will not be thinking it's easy.
No, I
Uh,
mean, this thing, like, it was really, it was tough. And it just like the flow, like, just kept speeding up and speeding up. And I'm like, all right, like, I think I'm gonna have to just watch everyone for a minute because it really was killing me. And it was great though. I really enjoyed it. So, one thing I did want to bring up, like me, you love travel. You're in Australia right now, which we didn't mention to our listeners. What has it been like to travel a lot sober?
mm. I feel really, really blessed for it. I took my first trip about 6 months out. So I've wanted to travel my entire life. Like my
Okay.
entire life, I've dreamed about. I was born in Oklahoma, in a tiny little town in Oklahoma, and like I was like always thinking about all the places in the world, and so always really wanting to travel. And I didn't leave the country until I got sober, thankfully. Um, but yeah, about 6 months in, and I remember I was working on a ship, on a cruise ship, and there were people drinking, and I remember being like, I couldn't believe that I was gone.
Mm.
Everyone was terrified that I have left the country, and I'm only 6 months sober, but I didn't want to drink. And it's like it really gave me this kind of like, you can have this or this, you can have this or this. It's like, oh, you can drink, or you could literally like have the world. You could
Mm.
drink or you could have the world.
Wow.
So that first trip, I was in the Mediterranean all summer, and then I was in Thailand and in Bali, which wound up being a home of mine later on.
Wow.
And it's like I just didn't realize how much the addiction had gave me horse blinders, not only on like my personal life, but in terms of like what I envisioned for myself, the dreams that I had, like how small that I was living.
Wow. Yeah.
So that really solidified like even more like I'm doing this, like because I'm gonna do this, and I know that in order to travel and to live this life that I want to live, I can't drink.
Mm.
Like that will be the one thing that will knock my knees out from under me.
I want to ask. I get that. That's awesome. So it sounds like when you started to travel and travel sober, like it just opened up your mind to a lot of different things, which I think I can relate to as well. I do want to ask though, like, and not to say like we don't want to take people's suggestions, and because I think that's important. But I do want to ask, like, were there people telling you not to go when you were 6 months sober? Like, the reason I
Oh,
asked is because, like as I interview people, as I talk to more people, I think there are a lot of things that we think are set in stone in terms of recovery, like rules, basically. And I think most of them are probably like pretty accurate, like certain things we should and shouldn't do for the most part. But then there are other things like leaving the country 6 months sober, and it's like, yeah, someone might say, "Oh, that's the worst idea. You're going to relapse," but you didn't, and you went out and you found this awesome life. I think that says a lot about, uh, well, being true to yourself, if anything. You know, um,
I think that it's all personal. There were definitely people that were not excited about it.
yeah,
In terms of what happened is that I was offered work, and it was an opportunity that like I couldn't pass up.
that's
I
up,
couldn't
yeah,
pass up. I was a massage therapist already,
okay,
and I was asked to come and do massage on on a cruise, like on a cruise trip.
Yeah.
And then I was asked to go to Thailand to help assist teach Thai massage, which
Wow.
are both things that I'd already done. And they literally lined up like within a day of each other. Like I did the cruise, there were two separate things I was asked to do. It's like
Okay. Okay.
almost within the same weeks,
Wow.
these two things popped up. They lined up like this, and I haven't really stopped traveling since. It was really wild. It was serendipitous, but people didn't want me to go, but it completely shifted everything for me. It completely shifted everything. Whenever I was in like Thailand and Bali, especially Bali, that was the first place that I'd ever been where people were partying and nobody was using any substances. I
Wow.
was there for a month and nobody ever offered me a drink because nobody was drinking. Like it blew my mind. So this is not the
Interesting.
case on the coast in Bali. They're big party towns, but where I was teaching the retreat was in Ubud, Bali, and it's like a health and wellness like mega center. And it I just couldn't believe it. There's like yoga studios everywhere and meditation, and everyone was dancing and like jungle parties, and there was no alcohol. I'm like, who are you people?
Wow.
Like it was so bizarre. But just seeing a different way that people were living was being able to see many different ways that people were living was such a so needed.
Well, so I want to ask, where is the favorite destination? Where's the best place you think you visited in your mind? What tops the list?
It just depends on what I'm after. I really
Okay.
love living in Bali. But Bali's incredible. It's absolutely beautiful. Some of my other favorites is I love Morocco. The aesthetics of Morocco. I don't think I could live there. I have some challenges, some kind of more of like the cultural challenges there, but aesthetically, Morocco is incredible, incredible. I love the Greek islands are wonderful.
Man, you're naming all these spots that are on my list. Haven't
They're
made it to any of these yet.
and in Guatemala. You need to go to Guatemala.
So I
There's a
went there when I was
nonstop
yeah,
nonstop
super
flight,
young.
2.5 hours
Okay.
from Houston.
From Houston. That's pretty quick.
Yeah,
That's pretty quick. Okay.
go to
Awesome.
Lake Atitlan and Antigua. Oh, they're beautiful.
So
And so
yeah.
San Marcos is a little town at the lake, and it's kind of has a similar vibe in terms of like there's not like it's not like a big party scene or anything like that.
Okay.
More about health and wellness.
Yeah. That sounds pretty awesome. Well, so
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about what's going on with your Emerge recovery program.
So this is something that I've wanted to do for a really long time. I've
Yeah.
been thinking about it for a long time, and I'm finally getting it prepared. So it is an 8-week online course, and I've blended kind of Buddhist philosophy, yoga philosophy, lots of different things. We'll be utilizing mantras and mudras, and there's asana classes, which is what we call the stretches or the postures
Okay.
in
Yeah.
yoga, and lots of self inquiry. So there's really quite a bit going on. We'll have about 3 lives a week, some teaching, and it'll be community based. It'll take about 20 people, and we'll go through it together over 8 weeks.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
That sounds really
yeah.
cool.
I'm really looking forward to it, and it's going to blend. It's going to blend a lot of different things, a lot of different pull from a lot of different philosophies, because I feel like we're also unique and different things resonate with us.
Mm.
So being able to offer a wide variety, and that we've picked pieces of to create our own, personal recovery toolbox. I just really feel like when we get a little bit of empowerment in our journey and our recovery, then we're able to really own that a bit more. Going back to me and you both saying, like, when we make the choice for ourselves, or
Right.
whenever we made the choice for ourselves, the decision for ourselves, how that shifted everything. So being able to kind of be more in control of how that happens. So hoping to give lots of information and lots of practices that way.
Yeah, for sure. No, that sounds awesome. And so would you say this is for any level of yogi, beginners, anyone's welcome, or who would you say this is best fit for?
Yeah, I say that this is really open for all levels, and it was created that way as well.
Okay.
The yoga, the actual like physical yoga, is a quite a small component of it. So
Okay.
there's like a 30-minute class each week
Hmm.
that is based upon the theme. Um, so like week one is honesty. So there'll be like a thematic, the whole week would be thematic, but there would be like a 30-minute yoga class. There'd also be like a 30-minute meditation that week. And then we have some live calls and activities and things throughout the week, journal entries and,
That's
different
awesome.
things throughout the week. But the actual physical yoga is quite a small component of it, but we do kind of delve into mindfulness and self-inquiry, I would say is um, more the gist of it. So I really think it's somebody who is curious about creating a deeper relationship with themselves and their recovery. And I think that this can be for people that are newer to recovery. I think it could be for people who have been in recovery for a while and are maybe
Yeah.
feeling a little stagnant and
Mm,
wanting to revive it and explore a bit more.
sure.
Because this goes way past just not drinking. Like we're really going to kind of dive in and really create more freedom. I'm still going after that more freedom.
Yeah.
And I think that there's always room to come a little closer to wholeness. And yeah, there's no ceiling on like how free do you want to be.
Man,
So
love that.
yeah.
I love that. Yeah, no, and I think right now, especially like just when you said maybe it's someone that's been sober for a little while and they just want to mix things up. I feel like a lot of people are looking, especially with just like I think we know what's going on in the world, the craziness going on in the world. It's like I think people are looking for something different, but also looking for a way to, like you said, get in touch with themselves, get back to basics, and I would consider like some of the things you're talking about, although they may not be things that like someone is familiar with, or even if it was some new stuff to me, they all sound like things that are kind of at the root once again of what
Yeah.
recovery's all about, and it sounds like something that could seems like pretty much every like Zoom 12-step meeting I've been in lately has been about getting back to the basics. So I think that's like just like drilled into my head right now. So maybe that's why that came up. But I did want to ask, like, what is your recovery? I know yoga is a big part of it, but what does your recovery look like today? Like, how do you maintain and continue to grow in your sobriety?
I think that I've really been exploring a lot of Buddhism lately, which has been a big piece. The Buddhism and the mindfulness and the meditation have been really fascinating and really interesting to me. And I think meditation was something that I veered away from for a long time. I, on the other hand, you mentioned that you really like the restorative, like the chill yoga. I'm like,
Yeah,
like I'm
got
always like,
gotta
go, 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 go.
get
So
moving.
for me to
Yeah,
be still, it's challenging. It's much easier for me to like be throwing handstands and like, doing really fast. But for whenever
yeah,
I get still, it's like what happens to my mind when my body gets still.
mm,
That that can be really challenging, where everything starts,
yeah,
and that's something that I've been exploring a lot in meditation and seeing what comes up. It's like our bodies our bodies and our minds are always giving us messages on like where we can deepen a bit more. And a big part of my recovery is staying connected to the community and talking about it and sharing about it. And I was getting to like work in more rehabs. Whenever I was traveling, I would go and like share my story in a treatment center when I travel,
oh cool,
different things like this. I was working at a prison in Bali when I
wow,
was there. Not doing that any at the moment here in Australia, but yeah, doing service work has been a really big piece of it, keeping it really relevant in my mind.
hmm.
Because even for someone who, even I can sometimes have the thought of, am I exaggerating? Like, was it that bad?
Right,
And I
right,
would be like, slap
yeah,
myself.
yeah, yeah.
So keeping it relevant and present and like, staying in it's really important. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I think that should Like, I mean, that's, you know, if we're going to talk about a 12-step program, like that's it right there is, you know, carrying the message somehow. And I think, you know, I think it's an interesting deal because it's like, you know, I'm not that person anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have the same mindset of that person. And I don't want to continue to like kind of box myself into where I used to be. But at the same time, I think like you're saying, like it's important that I have that reminder.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not like I want to go back there ever.
Right.
But yeah, I think like just the way my mind works too, it's like, gosh, I don't want to say I've ever really said, was it really that bad? But, you know, I've had kind of like, initially, normally what happens is it's like I'll have one kind of crazy thought. And then thankfully, the second thought is acknowledging how crazy the first thought was,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so I'm grateful for that for sure. So, before we wrap up here, I want to ask if there's one piece of advice that you would like to share with the Sober Nation.
I think one thing that I think about often is that had somebody told me like when I was first getting sober, like what is it that you want? Like what do you envision your life like? Like anything. You could have anything. Um, I wouldn't have written it as good as it is. Like I would have sold myself short because I didn't even have the language for what I have now. Like I didn't have the language at that time to even describe like the full life that I have now. I would have sold myself so short. So I think it's very important to vision what it is that you're after, but leave room for possibility, and to realize that addiction makes our world very small, horse blinders, and just being able to allow in possibility, to allow in a bigger perspective, and to be open to that shifting. I think it's so important that we can allow our filters and our perspectives to be changed, and to be continually open to learning and listening and welcoming, you know, what is possible.
That's really awesome, man. I couldn't, you're speaking my language right there. Like I could not have put that any better. And, you know, it's funny because one of the most recent meetings I was in, like I kind of had the realization, we were talking about control. And the realization I had is that when I'm controlling things, because what you just described has been my experience, like I would have been selling myself short big time. And like I couldn't even have imagined the life that I have today. And, you know, when I'm controlling things, it's with the mindset that my outcome is the best outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And that has not been the case. Like when I stop controlling things, like a lot of times, like something way better happens that, you know, that I couldn't even have imagined. So I really love that. And I definitely appreciate the advice to stay open-minded. I think that's just, it doesn't matter how long we've been sober, how old we are, what we think we know. There's always room to grow and room for improvement. So you can learn more about Cole by visiting colechanceyoga.com. Thanks again for coming on the show, Cole.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
Be sure to check out the show notes for all the info from today's episode. Sober Nation FM is brought to you by Sobriety Engine. Sobriety Engine is a free online community of men and women supporting each other in their recovery. Visit sobrietyengine.com to join today. This show is also brought to you by Recover Health. If you're ready to get fit and start living a healthier lifestyle while supporting your sobriety, you can learn more about having me as your own personal fitness and nutrition coach at rcvrhealth.com. And again, whether you're listening to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or watching on YouTube, please share this with your friends, follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. Nation, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.